Story 1. I was a delivery driver's assistant. On one trip, he told me that as a child, he used to go around his neighborhood, grab people's cats and dogs, put them in a sack, and throw them into the river. He said it was fun. When we returned to work, I told him I did not like going on deliveries with him and that he needed a new assistant. The boss who approved this was my father, so that is the only time I have used nepotism to my benefit at work. Story 2. A man bragged about the fact that there was blood on the sheets after he assaulted our mutual friend's younger sister. Fortunately, he is now in jail, although not for that or the other assaults he admitted to, but for driving under the influence. Story 3. Many years ago, I had a relationship with a young woman who was around 19 or 20 years old. I was 21. She had a young child about 2 years old and lived with her mother. While driving her home after a date, she asked for my opinion on something that surprised me. Her mother was seeing a man and wanted to have a baby with him, but was unable to have any more children. The boyfriend suggested that the daughter be a surrogate mother. They asked my girlfriend if she would agree to be the surrogate, and she did. I asked if they had already looked into in vitro fertilization. She said they were going to do it the old-fashioned way. I had to clarify. Her mom's boyfriend wanted to have relations with both her and her mother until she got pregnant, and all three were okay with this, and she wanted to know if I would stay around. She said yes. I dropped her off and never spoke to her again. Story 4. When I was in trade school, one of my clients told me that her father used her to lure a child into his car and then murdered the child. She said it as casually as talking about the weather. Story 5. I knew someone who had serious road rage. Sometimes, when another driver angered him enough, he said he would follow them home, park outside their house, and contemplate harming them, but not go through with it. Like Jesus Christ, calm down. Story 6. My older cousin told my mom he wanted to marry me. He was in his 30s at the time. I was a preteen. His mom said his traumatic brain injury kept him at a 13-year-old mindset. He called me on my 16th birthday and asked if he should continue to wait for my 18th birthday. I told him no and got off the phone. I told my mom to stop forcing me to talk to him. I honestly don't know why she kept allowing him to be around me, knowing he was a creep. At that point, he was back in Oklahoma. I know someone is going to ask. He is like a third cousin or whatever. His dad was related to someone on my mom's side. Story 7. My best friend's girlfriend told us her mother and her mother's partner were shot in the head while talking in his car. The crime was all over the local news. Her father was a police detective. She was certain he did it and told investigators, as did several other family members. He was never called in as a suspect, and the crime was never solved. The police department just buried it. Story 8. When I was 14, I was admitted to a psychiatric ward for a 72-hour hold. The hospital was small enough that it put teenagers and younger children together, so it was a mixture of kids my age and some much younger children. There was a boy there around 5 years old. I felt bad for him. He was really shy and nervous. Sometimes parents would claim their child was crazy to avoid taking care of them, so I thought he might have been one of those children. He was coloring in the main area, so I sat down and asked him if he knew why he was there. He pulled the lollipop out of his mouth and said, "I stabbed my sister in the eye with scissors," as if he were telling me about the weather. I still think about that boy sometimes. I really hope he got help. Story 9. Growing up in South Africa, crime is an unfortunate reality. I'll never forget a colleague coming to work late. When I jokingly asked if she had overslept, she replied, "No, someone tried to steal my car and kidnap me as I was backing out of my driveway. But I guess he didn't think I would retaliate." Long story short, I had to wait for the police to remove his body from blocking me in. At least I know my shooting skills are still okay. By the way, have you proofread the article I emailed you yesterday? The deadline is today. Story 10. There is some dark content that has been shared, so I will keep it lighter but still strange and eerie. I knew a man who collected all his nasal mucus. He kept it in a container. He would pick his nose and store all the nasal mucus in a jar. He laughed about it as if it were normal. Story 11. That he had to eat his own feces for his survival. To those wondering, no, it is not the same as drinking your urine. It is the opposite, actually. Story 12. My female cousin told me her grade 11 English teacher took whatever her brother had left of her virginity. This would have occurred about 60 years ago in New England. She told me about it 2 years ago. Story 13. I used to work in a mall. A guy from another store would frequently come in and was generally nice but always made me uncomfortable because he was a real, where's my hug at type of person. One time, he told us a story with full confidence about how the night before he was in a mosh pit at a heavy metal show. While in the pit, he kept bumping into a girl. He is well over 6 feet tall and a strong, muscular guy. According to him, the girl had enough of him crashing into her and lightly smacked him on the back of the head as a way of saying, "Stop crashing into me." She then moved away from him and the show went on. This bothered him so much that he motioned back toward her and purposely swung his arm into her face while motioning. He broke her nose and was proud of it, telling the story as if it were something impressive. Because she was bleeding and had a broken nose, she reported him to security. However, because he had connections with the venue, he got her thrown out and banned. Never in my life have I been so shocked that someone would voluntarily tell a story like this while bragging about it. Story 14. Someone legitimately showed me child pornography once on their phone. He said, "Is this normal in your country?" I said, "That is immoral and illegal in most countries," and promptly left. Story 15. Wasn't me, but my uncle drunkenly called my cousin after a recent family gathering. He told her that he really enjoyed seeing her 2 young daughters, and while they were playing on his lap, he became aroused. She didn't know what to say and awkwardly ended the call. I grew up with this man like a father figure in my life. I have no recollection of any of this happening to me. He has a daughter whom he gained full custody of when she was a baby and raised her on his own. He also now has a young granddaughter. We believe my cousin and support her however she decides to proceed. This has shaken the family members who know about it, but my aunt does not want anyone to say anything to him. Story 16. I had an ex who would verbally degrade me when he got angry. I did not even have to do anything wrong, but he would find some way to blame me and get angry with me for it. He generally said that he did all of that for my benefit so that I would be a better person and tolerable to be around. One day, he admitted that he actually did all of that because he liked how it felt when I reacted to it. He admitted that he got gratification from my distress. Story 17. They found their deceased 5-year-old brother last week, but it is fine, even funny. They admitted themselves to a psychiatric hospital the next day. I hope they are doing okay. Story 18. A woman who abused me told me that her ex-girlfriend had ruined her life by throwing everything out on the lawn and obtaining a restraining order. She phrased it in a way that made me think the girlfriend had been hurting her, and that I would be justified in helping her. I later learned she had many charges against her, including drunk and disorderly conduct and domestic abuse. I was just her next target. It is disturbing to admit you abused your partner and believe it is their fault. Story 19. He told me that when he was a kid, he forced the neighbor girls into his closet, made them undress, and then placed marbles from our Hungry Hungry Hippos game in their private areas. Then he would make them jump up and down to retrieve the marbles. My brother, when he was 15, he shared this as a way to justify his actions, saying it isn't that big of a deal since it's not even the worst thing he's ever done, because he had just been caught watching sexual assault material on my mom's computer at school. She was a teacher and was nearly fired for it. No, my parents never got him counseling. Boys will be boys after all. He is getting married in October. They want children. Story 20. Not me, but my friend was talking to some coworkers about the worst thing they had ever done. All the stories were pretty tame until a man admitted that he had set fire to and burned down his high school. Story 21. It is a tie between a man casually admitting he beat a rabbit to death with a shovel, and my abusive ex admitting that if she saw a baby carriage unattended, she would kidnap the child. She did not use that word. She just said take, and framed it as if she would be rescuing the child. Story 22. I was on a Greyhound once, and this guy was on the phone casually admitting to have just murdered someone. The driver of the bus pulled over and kicked him off. It was wild. Story 23. I worked at a dive shop where we were planning our trips for the next year and a major trip 2 years ahead. A man over 60 suggested we should do our big trip to a resort in the Philippines because there was a brothel nearby with underage girls. He shared this with me and the male owner privately, as both of us were recently single. He was promptly removed and banned from future trips. Story 24. My ex-boyfriend was drunk and admitted to raping and sexually assaulting every foster child his mother was helping. He did not express any remorse. After I stared at him, he said with a disgusting smirk, "She had over 100 kids in and out of the house from the time she started taking them." Story 25. Someone once told me they liked to watch people sleep because it made them feel powerful. I never stayed over again. Story 26. I was on the phone with someone. At one point, they started laughing during the conversation and said they had an accident. I thought they were kidding. A couple of minutes later, I heard water running and assumed they were washing dishes. The conversation continued, but I still heard water running. I asked what they were doing, and they said they were cleaning themselves because they had actually had an accident. I ended the call quickly after that. It seemed strange to continue a conversation while cleaning for that long. Story 27. This girl admitted to killing her baby. She was a young methamphetamine addict in Texas. I was a homeless traveler at the time, and I think I asked her for some quick directions around Fort Worth. She was walking with me and admitted that she had a child who died. She literally said, "It upset me so much I took that thing and shook it." I was completely thinking, why isn't she in jail? The worst part was she said it happened around her 18th or 19th birthday. Other stories include murder by beating someone up and urinating on them in the cold, which resulted in death. Another man said he shot his dog and was in the woods starving when a poodle appeared, and they ate it. I do not know how much is true, but it is too crazy to even process in the moment. Story 28. The postmaster said, "The postman thought there was a woman living there alone. After filing a complaint about the postman opening 3 doors and crossing an entire house at 8 a.m. while my partner and I were naked in bed to deliver a letter addressed to my partner's house in my name when I had a letter sent there, the man was lucky to leave with his life. If he had said that to me in the moment, I would have let go of the dog." Story 29. I remember asking my grandmother if it were true that mothers would crush poppy seeds and give them to their children back in the old country. She replied, "Oh yes, we all did. We had too much work on our farms to deal with a fussy child. There was my neighbor who accidentally gave her baby too much, and she died. That was sad. Anyway." Story 30. He was going to take advantage of a girl who was on her way to becoming blackout drunk. I stayed by her side and even accompanied her to the hospital when she started vomiting. Story 31. I knew a man who bragged to a group of us that he was intimate with a cow while growing up on the farm. He even had a name for it. Stump broke heifer. This is true and not made up. Story 32. When I was a young police officer, a newly hired coworker told me that he lied on his background investigation. I believe he wanted to impress me. I still don't understand why. It turns out he had sexually assaulted someone in the military. His fingerprints never showed any issues. This was typical Department of Defense practice 35 years ago. I started an investigation, took him into custody, and he was fired within 72 hours. He seemed like a nice guy. They all do. Story 33. Bestiality? I don't know what to call it, to be honest. I knew this guy from work. He was always weird, but people seemed to accept his strange behavior, even when he was bullying others. It was a very unusual situation from the start. He had 2 dogs, a male dachshund and a female Shih Tzu. When the Shih Tzu got pregnant, he told us all, with great excitement and detail, about how he had helped them. It was disgusting, and everyone just laughed. I took a step back after that. Felt more wrong than his previous odd behavior. I didn't like that. 2 years later, he was prosecuted for making, distributing, and possessing child sexual abuse images. Hundreds of the worst category of images involving very young children. He never went to jail. Story 34. A former friend and her equally unpleasant acquaintance bragged about how they used to physically abuse their children. It is not surprising that the man lost custody of his children and ended up in jail for another reason. I ended my relationship with that friend because she was clearly a terrible person. Story 35. This spring, a Norwegian television channel, TV2, published a documentary about a Norwegian man who admitted that he had assisted people in committing suicide. The entire story was unbelievable, and the man was extremely disturbing. They eventually interviewed him at a hotel, and during filming, they contacted the police. The story was both unbelievable and very disturbing. Story 36. Absolutely not suitable for life. I actually really wish this wasn't reality, but around the early 2010s, I Facebook befriended a man who was probably 25 years my senior. He seemed like a chill person with great taste in music and a self-aware, self-deprecating sense of humor. A cool uncle vibe. Well, anyway, he messaged me out of the blue after being friends for over a year and started asking about my sexual partners in high school. He then informed me that he was currently on drugs, never specified, and on a hunting trip with another male friend. According to him, they were having intercourse with their dogs during this trip. I unfriended him quickly, but he did reach out later with a message saying, "Hey man, sorry for being weird last week. I was pretty high." This was not some anonymous stranger. He had some recognition in his industry. Story 37. They had a falling out with a known sex trafficker and pedophile because they had stolen one of their spa employees. Story 38. I did not hear it directly, but my coworkers told me that one of our former coworkers admitted to microwaving a hamster while laughing about it. Story 39. I have some criminal convictions from when I was young and inexperienced. I was 18, so they charged me as an adult. Drug charges? School shooting. Story 40. A Polish man I knew told me that when he lived in Poland, his family dog broke its leg. He took the dog out to the woods and put it to death to end its suffering. I had many questions but did not ask any. He said it so casually that I knew it was true. It was not a boast or a confession. It just came up in conversation. Story 41. When I was in high school, a couple came and spoke at one of our assemblies. They explained they had a radical parenting plan that involved introducing their children to adulthood when they came of age. In other words, the mother taught the son about sex by having it with him, and the father did the same with their daughter. I remember thinking, what is going on? The strangest part of the assembly was that they were allowed to finish speaking, and no one cut the microphone or stopped them. Faculty members who could have interrupted them did not. I think everyone was just so stunned that no one took action. Story 42. This man I knew grew up in foster care. He told me his foster mother bred dogs. He said he used to strangle the puppies to see how long he could do it and if they would still wake up. I never asked follow-up questions because I did not want to know if he actually killed any. He has many issues now, which is not a surprise. Story 43. A coworker casually told me that he served 20 years in prison for murdering 2 women who were stranded on the side of the road. He brought the bodies back to his house. Another coworker approached and he stopped talking about it. I never learned any more details. Story 44. My ex's friend casually mentioned his desire to get a former classmate so drunk that she would sleep with him. He said this at a wedding reception, and everyone knew that she was a low-functioning alcoholic. No one said anything. The man admitted to wanting to sexually assault her. Thankfully, he did not follow through with his plan. There was much wrong with that friend group, but I was the bad person when I pointed it out repeatedly. Story 45. One kid I went to an after-school and summer program with boasted about feeding seagulls bits of bread with sewing needles in them as if it were the funniest thing in the world. Unfortunately, he has a very common name, and I have no idea what he would look like as an adult, so I cannot look him up. On the upside, I have not seen his name come up as a serial killer, so I hold out hope that he was just being a foolish 12-year-old trying to be edgy and not actually engaging in animal cruelty. Story 46. I'm automatically attracted to beautiful people. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. I don't even wait. And when you are a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab them by the private area. You can do anything. The fact that this is not even the creepiest thing this source has casually admitted is unbelievable. Story 47. Years ago, my uncle revealed to my family that when he was in the army, David Berkowitz, also known as Son of Sam, was in the same barracks during basic training. He said the man was mentally unstable. He would walk around with a broom as if he were marching with a rifle and threw his footlocker at one of the drill instructors. Fortunately, my uncle was given a medical discharge due to health issues and never saw him again. Story 48. My long-ago ex-boyfriend, Charlie, was divorced. His ex-wife had a young daughter, and he raised her. Fast forward, she is 20 and on the outs with her mom, who is now divorced, but calls Charlie to have a place to stay for a while. She is getting her life together, and Charlie decides he is in love with her, her one and only father figure. He tells her, and she left pretty quickly after. Right after, he talks about marrying me but wanting to invite her to the wedding. Nope, I'm out. I was absolutely shocked by his nonchalance, especially considering my stepfather raised me. I could not imagine doing that to your daughter. Story 49. They shoved a metal clothes hanger inside themselves to induce an abortion. They went into great detail about what came out while laughing. I understand. I laugh at my trauma too, but it was quite disturbing and ruined the mood of the party. Story 50. They believe that because they have used psychedelics, they can feel the spirit of their pets and therefore think it is acceptable to perform sexual acts with them. Before you ask, yes, I reported them. The claim was proven to be untrue, thankfully, but they said it nonetheless. Story 51. Met a woman on a dating site. Long story short, she wanted me to come to Manchester to get her pregnant. I found out she was married and had a teenage son and a young daughter. I never took it any further. About a year later, I saw this woman online and we started chatting. She casually told me she was pregnant by her 16-year-old son. That was not the worst part. She said her husband was trying to get their daughter pregnant. Story 52. I had a plumber who used to work for us as a contractor. He told me how he used to swing animals around by their tails and light them on fire in cages. I told him he had some serious issues, to say the least. I never spoke to him afterward. Story 53. I was new to a town and trying to make friends. I got invited to a house party where a group of guys were laughing about the time they pranked their friend, who was far too drunk. They started with a shot glass of water and the guy shot it. Then they went to the fridge and the drunk guy took shots of different condiments. These guys were hysterical. Then they said, "Remember when he actually drank the kerosene for the heater? We told him it was alcohol." They laughed and called him an idiot for passing out and spending several days in the hospital because he did not wake up. It was clear that I never wanted to be near those people again. I went home early and left without saying goodbye. Story 54. When I was a massage therapist, a client once told me she was going through a divorce because her husband had been abusing their young daughter. It was a lot to hear in a voicemail canceling an appointment. It really affected me. Story 55. I did not know what I would find in here, but some of these posts are much darker than I was expecting. Story 56. When I was 15, I was waiting for my father to pick me up when an elderly man, at least in his 60s, approached me and started talking. He asked my name, what I was doing, and requested a fist bump. I was clearly uncomfortable but didn't know how to leave the situation. Thankfully, some girls came over and spoke with me. Then the man said, "Oh yeah, just here with my girlfriend," and leaned on me. I lost my temper and loudly told him to leave immediately. The girls and their mother comforted me and stayed until my father arrived. Such inappropriate individuals. Story 57. They throw rocks at stray cats to hurt or scare them because they hate cats and wish they would all die. Story 58. I used to have a pair of really cool fish. They died, though, and I still have not cleared their corpses out of my freezer. Story 59. Someone at my old work told me his wife went out for a drink, got very drunk, and late that night he had to go pick her up from the pub. When they got home, she just passed out on the bed. Since he was angry about it, he decided to assault her. After this, I decided I didn't want to work for those people anymore. He was bragging about it. Story 60. "Bro, she's so hot," said a guy I used to work with, talking about the 15-year-old hostess. I pointed it out and said, "Bro, I don't even care. She's bad. Dog, you're like 40, stop." Story 61. A woman I knew casually mentioned that when she is mad at her husband, She cuts the crotch out of all his pants. Story 62. Back in the 1990s, men used to admit they were going to Thailand to have sex with very young sex workers. I heard that more than once. Story 63. My mother's family moved to Bountiful, Utah in 1974. She was in her car with a friend during a rainstorm and is nearly certain that the man who approached her car was Ted Bundy. This was shortly before Debbie Jean Kent disappeared. Story 64. Growing up, I used to go to Hawaii every year. There was one very religious family that always stayed in that area. Their children were always casually talking about how the gay people are going to burn in hell, while the rest of us children were just trying to play tag. I was also closeted at the time, so it was creepy. Story 65. Not as strange as some of these others, but I had a coworker casually mention at work that he got angry at his grown daughter and threw a television down a flight of stairs at her. Story 66. A coworker told me her uncle had been in a relationship with his niece, her cousin, since she was 11. They had 11 children. 3 died in infancy, and most of them suffered from fetal alcohol syndrome. I think she mentioned at least a couple of the children were taken from them, but I cannot remember for sure. No one in their town suspected anything was wrong in the situation because they assumed, since they had the same last name, that they were married. Story 67. After her mother's death, my mother told me that she talked constantly about killing me once the dementia was in full swing. I have 4 siblings, but she constantly said I needed to die. The worst part was that I would wake up in the night to her standing over me, staring at me. One Thanksgiving, I felt her presence behind me, and when I turned around in classic horror movie fashion, she was just staring at me, holding the carving knife. She was abusive and a bad drunk and pill addict. It still makes me angry that my mother didn't care about my safety and made me feel like a jerk when I said I was uncomfortable around her. Story 68. A girl said casually that she let her older sisters, her older boyfriend, and his friend harm her repeatedly for her 12th birthday last week. She also mentioned how funny it was when she humiliated one of them. I was resting along the side entrance to the mall, coming from the parking lot. They were on their way out of the mall, and this line came out as they passed me. By the time I registered what I had heard, they were 20 feet away, and I was looking directly into the bright sunlight, so they were mostly shadows. It was very creepy and scary how that fact was mentioned so casually. Story 69. My ex-girlfriend said that she wanted to assault me. She also said that she wanted me to use her tongue as toilet paper. I declined both offers. Story 70. Man, I just need to get out in the woods and hunt something. I'm about to go crazy. A coworker said this to another coworker within earshot of me. The same man carried a weapon, bragged about running over a dog, said he liked to watch hunting dogs tear apart hogs, and said he couldn't wait to take his wife's dog outside and shoot it. He scared me, but everyone else just considered him a good old boy. Story 71. If he saw the chance to assault a woman and get away with it, he would. I was 16 and thought this was something I could fix. Spoiler, he assaulted me. Story 72. I dated a man for a while. Near the end of the relationship, we were out having a drink with a friend when he casually mentioned that one time he and another friend had gotten drunk with a woman. He said she was leaving the apartment and fell, hitting her head on the glass of their coffee table. They thought she had died. After that, they rolled her up in a carpet and were going to dispose of her but realized, while trying to load her into the car, that she was still alive. So they unrolled her and took her home. That was only one of several strange sociopathic tendencies I noticed, so I wisely ended the relationship soon after. Story 73. A person admitted that they engaged in sexual activities with underage girls who were exploited by their mothers. They expressed pride in this because the girls were indigenous. I am no longer friends with this person. Story 74. I was a trainer for a few years. One day, a couple attended the class I was teaching with their young adult son. I asked them if they had any summer trips planned, just making polite conversation. Turned out they really loved Thailand. The husband then launched into a detailed description of his preference for getting massages with happy endings in Thailand. His wife and son were right there. It was awkward and frankly creepy. Story 75. I was at a party hosted by a friend where some of his coworkers were invited. We were sitting around the table playing a board game, and the topic of gonorrhea came up. He said, "Let's be honest. Who here has not had a sexually transmitted disease?" We all quietly raised our hands. He left shortly after. Story 76. Not sure I should be sharing this, but my old job was taking care of children at recovery centers. One of the boys admitted to sticking screws in his little brother's anus. Needless to say, the stories I heard there made my skin quite thick. Story 77. When we moved to a city, you know what is so awesome about being an adult now? We could just get a kitten and play with it all day. And once we were bored, you could just open your door and let it out and never worry about it again. They would just probably die. Story 78. I am someone who has always had the misfortune of random people wanting to tell me their deep dark secrets. I wear a resting bitch face and a don't give a fuck face nonstop, so it has always been a mystery why they want to share these things with me. When I was about 12 years old, a repairman came to fix the oven and somehow decided to tell me his wife shot and killed her first husband. I did not get the impression it was self-defense. All I could think was, you married someone knowing she killed her first husband? I got out of the kitchen quickly to get away from the man. Story 79. Someone once told me they like to stand completely still in the dark, just to see if their pets notice. If not, they whisper their names very slowly, like a horror movie villain. Story 80. This was at a house party, and I was chatting with a random man. He said that while partying in Las Vegas, he helped a drunk woman up to her room. She passed out on the bed, and he did not do anything to her, as if he had done a good deed. To this day, I do not know how I reacted on my face. Story 81. A friend in our peer group said they knew where a dead body was and told us of a spot near where they found Molly Bish's body in 2002, 1 year before she was discovered. We all hunted that area for wild turkey. Story 82. In 1990, I was living in Hackney. There was a local criminal family with an eldest brother who couldn't leave the house because he was wanted on many charges. For some reason, my squat mate Fat Reg the Rockabilly convinced me to go over there, where the younger brother told us about his nighttime activities. He would get invited back to gay men's flats, overpower them, tie them to chairs, and torture them. It was clear he raped them too, though he did not say so explicitly. Even as a teenager, I realized he was a self-hating homosexual. I just stared at the floor, but Reg, coward that he was, spluttered something like, "Serves them right for being gay." I am fairly sure he did not mean it and just wanted a way for us to leave on friendly terms. But still, the only other interaction I remember having with this man was when he squirted me with water from his second-story flat as I was walking past. This sounds relatively benign, but it was because he was cleaning out his syringes. Story 83. He told me with confidence that all men are attracted to children in one way or another. They usually do not admit it. It is super creepy and a very foolish thing to be telling everyone. Story 84. I was a Mormon missionary in my younger days. They sent us to visit a man who had a history with drugs and drug gangs. He couldn't have been over 25. He said, "I started using drugs when I was 15 and began selling them to afford my habit. I got in deep. I had money and a car, but I don't know how many people I killed. I lost count after 20. Yikes." He was trying to go straight but was still hooked on drugs. They thought a 20-year-old clueless American could realistically help. Story 85. A colleague casually confessed that he and his friends used methamphetamine during his biker days and committed sexual assault approximately 40 years ago. The incident was reported to Human Resources, but no action is expected. Story 86. Casually in a car with someone and they say, "Power, look at that fine thing," when they are wearing a school uniform and we are over 30. I never spoke to that person again and reported them directly to the police. Story 87. I was hanging out with one of my best friends at the time, playing video games and getting high. News broke about child sexual abuse material being spread on Facebook and a man being arrested for distribution. We were talking about how crazy it was that this man thought, "Man, you know who would love to see this heinous crime I just committed? All my friends and family on Facebook." Then, after wondering if he actually filmed it or if he had it on his phone and posted it, My friend said, "That's just stupid. Like if I came across child pornography, I'd definitely watch it to see what it was all about. But to then post it? You have to be crazy." Couldn't believe my ears. He didn't even try to backpedal. I just remember feeling this tightness in my chest like I was choking, and I was on my way home shortly afterward. I tried to convince myself he was just wasted, but he went from rambling and joking to saying that in such a clear and concise manner. It scared me. Story 88. Well, after reading some of your answers, my contribution to this conversation was not as interesting as I thought. I will be on my way. Story 89. When they used to work on a farm, they would throw cats into the cow manure pit and watch them struggle to get out. They never did get out. Story 90. A couple of friends did fruit picking for a season, traveling between multiple farms. He told me the shack they slept in was known as the walk shack because it had the best light for preparing drugs. They would let people use their shack to inject heroin like it was an injecting room. Story 91. When I was younger and more naive, I let a man walking down the street start a conversation with me. He told me that he had just been released from jail. When I asked why he was in jail, he said it was because he killed someone. Of course, I asked why he did it, and he responded, he just needed killing. Needless to say, I made up an excuse to leave as quickly as possible. Story 92. Yeah, I killed thousands of people, blew their heads off. My mobster roommate said that while listening to his Roger Stone podcast, right in the kitchen while I was there, he wasn't even talking to me. I tried to say something, but he just ignored me or didn't hear because he's losing his hearing. I decided not to press it further because he's stubborn and unpleasant. I'm so glad I threw him out eventually, but I wish I had done it much sooner. Edit. Forgot to mention he's a Vietnam veteran. Story 93. During a family dinner, my father-in-law said he had sexual relations with a 12-year-old child when he was 30. He said this in front of me, his son, and his wife as if it were nothing. Story 94. I had a teacher, one of the many football coaches teaching a course he was not qualified to teach, who proudly told us a story from his college days. He and his friends would grab cats and drop them from the top of the stadium to see what happened. He described the gruesome results in detail, laughing as if it were harmless, silly teenage antics. I was in total shock at what I was hearing. I think most of the class was shocked. I wish I had reported it, but I was young and naive. Probably nothing would have come of it, but I still wish I had. Maybe something, even just dismissal, would have happened to that cruel person and those poor animals would have received some justice. He was disturbing in other ways too, like taking excessive interest in the female students. I wish I had not even opened this thread. It makes me sick to my stomach to think about him. Story 95. My dad said, I let your mother work because my mother is and was a grown adult. She never needed anyone's permission to do the job that was her calling. Story 96. A man casually admitted that when I told him a girl he had a crush on was a lesbian, he felt he needed to kill her because lesbians needed to go extinct as he considered them harmful to humanity. He also expected me to help him because he thought I was heterosexual. Story 97. My brother was telling me what he found in my mother's diary, as if it were something we should gossip about. At first, he brought it up as if he had overheard it, but as soon as he revealed where he had actually learned it, I interrupted him as fast as I could and told him he was horrible for invading her privacy like that. He genuinely couldn't understand why it was such a violation to read a diary, since it was out on the table in the living room. To this day, I feel incredibly disappointed in him when I remember that he did that. Story 98. She was a high school English teacher who was in love with one of her underage students and was upset about him going to prom with an age-appropriate girl. This happened on a trip, and when I got home, I blocked her on all platforms and we never spoke again. Story 99. I was on a date with a guy, probably our second or third date, talking about our sexual interests. He fully admitted to making his old dog, who had already passed away at the time of our conversation, lick his penis. I was so stunned I didn't say anything. He elaborated that he would smear peanut butter on his penis and make the dog lick it off. I kind of tuned out after that and haven't seen him since. Story 100. One time my older brothers brought home an abandoned puppy they found in the woods. My mom didn't want to keep it, so they said they saved it from their friend's house. He was an irresponsible pet owner, along with his parents, and their dogs kept having puppies they didn't want. To get rid of them, he found harmful ways, according to my brothers. They said he would bury puppies up to their necks, run them over with the lawnmower, use them for target practice with his crossbow, and other cruel things he did not detail. The puppy they brought home was one he had missed previously, and he was thinking of microwaving it to see what would happen. They offered to take it, and when he protested, they lied and said my mom was looking for one as a present for me, so he let them. Story 101. This convicted felon, pedophile, and rapist casually mentioned how he watches girls in the pageant he owns. The same individual has also mentioned numerous times how sexually attracted he is to his daughter. Again, the same rapist stated on a popular radio show that he is a sexual predator. Story 102. I was driving a chauffeur, and a man admitted that he bought his wife from a Mexican sex slave trader. She was just one of many, but she was his favorite so far, and he planned to keep her around. His wife did not speak English and remained quiet the whole time. He tried to convince me to get one myself, saying that women should be treated as objects rather than living beings, and that if I did, my life would be better. I strongly disliked that man. Story 103. The night before my friend's first wedding, we were drunk partying in Reno. He casually mentioned how fun the whole wedding experience had been and said that if he got married again, he hoped we could have the same fun. He is currently on his third marriage. Story 104. A South African man I worked with during the 1990s casually recalled shooting someone dead during an African civil war in the 1980s, then continued drinking his coffee. Story 105. A friend of my sibling told me he joined the swing dancing club because he was abstinent, not by choice, and he enjoyed being able to press his body against the bodies of women. He also loved to hug people. Long, uncomfortable hugs where he would lean into you and rub his hands up and down your back, whether male or female. I stopped hanging out with him. Story 106. They like to stretch their anus with their hand while having a bowel movement. A different person wants to have a sexual relationship with their cousin who is about 25 years younger. Story 107. Once, a classmate mentioned that as a child, he used to drown cats in paint. I am glad I never had to interact with that person again. I cannot even remember his face now. Story 108. A man once told me he wants to be with me because I have a childlike vibe. I ran so fast from that date. Story 109. I picked up my first hitchhiker when I was 18, about 20 years ago. The first thing she said to me was, "I was hoping you were a man so I could do something for money." She was very casual about it. She then informed me that she used to be a professor at the college I was attending, but that was when she was a man. She had a vagina now and asked if I wanted to see it. That was, unsurprisingly, the last hitchhiker I picked up. Story 110. Here are a few things I've heard various people say over the years. When he looks in the mirror sometimes, instead of his reflection, he sees the face of a man he accidentally killed. He groomed a local woman with Down syndrome to perform oral sex in exchange for coloring books and puzzles. At one of his parties, a man cut off his own finger with an axe. He collects locks of random women's hair without their knowledge and keeps them in a special book. He sneaks into the office ladies' offices and sniffs their chairs. He knows each of their scents and when they menstruate. His friend has a jar full of ears that he cut off dead Viet Cong soldiers in Vietnam, floating in formaldehyde. His young cousin performs oral sex on all the men in his family. At one of his parties, a woman had sex with a dog in exchange for cocaine. He saw a man basically crucified in South Africa, and nobody did anything about it because they did not want trouble. He lived in a garage of a funeral home where bodies were sometimes stored, and he admitted that he enjoys the smell. He cut the tattoo off a dead woman's arm as a keepsake, which he keeps in a jar of formaldehyde. As a child, he saw his father beheaded, and the killers proceeded to play soccer with his father's severed head. Story 111. A man said he had to sexually assault a woman to have sex with her, but he claimed it was acceptable because he married her. Story 112. You try to make a cat do something it does not want to and then tell me it cannot consent, has lived in my brain against my will since I heard it 25 years ago. Story 113. My friend's brother once said that he thinks about how easy it would be to take someone off the street and do whatever he wanted to them. I was not sure exactly what he meant and was too afraid to ask. He had been drinking and seemed to just let it slip. But I never forgot it. Freaked me out. Story 114. Worked as a cashier on an army base. One customer brought up their items and said, "My grandfather molested me and many of my cousins when we were little, completely unprompted." The customer told me to search for his picture on the computer I was using. Absolutely bizarre and unsettling. Story 115. A coworker once told me that if his daughter grew up to date a black man, he would kill them both. That is beyond creepy. Story 116. He touched some random girl's feet on the train while they were sleeping. He had a foot fetish. My response was, "So that's assault and we are done here." Story 117. Sitting next to a pair of older ladies in my art class, I heard one casually say, "Yeah, I don't think pedophiles should be prosecuted because it's not like it's their fault." Story 118. My cousin took me to a strip club once, and I overheard two strippers talking about how they gave an entire group AIDS. Story 119. I grew up in London and briefly knew these gang members from around the area. I'm not talking about the guys you see in these United Kingdom drill videos, although I wouldn't necessarily rule out this behavior from some of them. But these were guys with no or limited social media, rarely seen, generally pretty unknown people. One day I was smoking weed with two of them in a park, and one mentioned that his fellow member had killed someone recently. A few months later, the person he was talking about was arrested for murder, and the guy I was with in the park who told me this was arrested because he helped dispose of the body, which had been cut into various pieces. Horrible. Strangely, the guy who helped dispose of the body only received a few years in prison. When he came out, he was shot and killed not long afterward. Insane stuff. These guys and their enemies, some of whom I also knew, caused me quite a bit of trauma in my teenage years. Road life is deranged, manipulative, low trust, and extremely traumatic. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.